In this video, we are going to talk about one of the biggest time wasters that is really underestimated. Now, our channel is dedicated to improve quality of life through increasing your perspective IQ to get you what you want. So the whole thing is that we're going to talk about it is really the biggest time waster, and I'm going to go into the detail why the value of time is really underestimated. So there's going to be a perspective change on how to look at time and the value of it. So the whole thing is that wasted a lot of time is unsolicited advice. Now, if we go into the definition of an unsolicited,
which I have.
Okay.
So unsolicited advice involves receiving information, advice, input, or suggestions from others that you have not requested. This is according to Google. This advice is often unwanted and can leave you feeling irritated, shamed, or judged. When someone offers their opinion on what you could be doing differently, it sometimes feels like criticism.
Exactly. So, like, if somebody gives you advice and it's kind of like, man, who asked you for it? It's kind of like that. It's like maybe you didn't even need help on certain things. Like some people give you a relationship advice and you're like, I don't even need it. It's like, why are you telling me?
Or you don't think you need it.
Or you don't think you need it. Absolutely correct. So if you really look at unsolicited advice, the most popular is like parents giving advice to kids. The kids feel like it's unsolicited advice. As a parent, you're like, you need this advice. You just don't listen. You're going to learn eventually. But kids think they know everything because they have Google, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, another one too is like siblings to siblings. So usually like when you're growing up in the same household and you see what your brother or sister is doing and you're kind of like, hey man, like, what are you thinking? And you bring it to their attention and then all of a sudden there's like a battle between wills, and it's just giving someone unsolicited advice when they don't want it is really wasting your time, because if they're not ready for the help, they're not going to receive it and you're basically wasting your breath.
So look, a lot of students, when they go to school, they're really getting a lot of unsolicited advice, but the students are forced there to go to school by law, unless you do homeschooling, but it's not really up to the kids, it's up to the parents. So when kids go to school, they are having unsolicited advice. They don't get to pick the subjects they get to learn on. They don't get to pick how the course works,
or their teachers.
Or the teachers. They don't really get to pick any of those. That's all unsolicited advice. That's why, like a lot of kids, I don't like them teaching me, but I have to do it. So eventually, since they got to be there, they have to be there on time. They have to go through all those things, and they're graded, and they're forced into that kind of funnel of education. Then they do pick up something. We do learn something. Like there were some classes I didn't like, and I didn't pay attention to it, but you pay attention enough to pass them, because the whole thing is you don't want to be left behind, because then you kind of lose status as a kid, like a dumb kid. You can't pass class. So you kind of learn, not because you want to, it's kind of like you have to because of other means.
And then it's kind of almost like what is it? Never mind.
Like it's just something that's not, it's kind of forced because you're put into that situation. Like if you don't show up and you're absent for a certain amount of time, the government will go after you. They'll find the parents. Believe me, if you ditch enough, they'll go after you.
Mm-hmm. No, but back to what I was thinking. We'll cut that out. When you go to a class that even if you don't really want to be there, you're going to end up learning something inevitably. And that's just like a byproduct of just having to be there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's the whole thing. So like the whole thing with unsolicited advice is that you really... Like to us, somebody else's problem is very obvious and we just tell them. Mm-hmm. But see, if it doesn't want to be received, then it's not taken in. You actually look like you're a bad guy. You're the bad person.
So judgmental.
Yeah, so when you want to go over there, you want to give advice, that's when you're really losing a lot of time. That's the biggest time waster. Is people are not ready to receive your advice, basically. And this is one of the biggest problems that I have. So let me put this exercise into the value of time. So let's say the thing is that the average age that people live up to is expectancy is 75. Okay? So let's pretend that you're 65 years old. So what happens is you have 10 years left. If you look at it mathematically, if you're going to if you're going to live up to 75 years and you're 65, you got 10 years left. 1 year is 10% of your life left. 1 year equals 10%. 10% is a lot. So like if you were, let's say, 10 years old, you got 65 years old. 1 year out of 65 is, not 10%. But once you get older, that's why old people are kind of grouchy. They just don't care. They don't even want green bananas. They want them now. That's why they don't like to deal with the small shit, because they know, they feel the urgency of how much time is left. Let's say you have 5 years left. All right? Now you're 70 and you have 5 years. 1 year equals 20%. So the older, the closer you get to the end of your life, hypothetically, right? We don't know when we're going to die. But see, it's worth more of your life. So the older you get, the more precious your time is going to get. So if you keep giving advice and nobody takes it, just to hell with them. Just move on. Because what you're really doing when you're wasting time with them, you're really saying no to all the other opportunities. That's why old people, sometimes they eat the dessert first, because maybe they're not going to make it towards the final dessert if they eat the entree first. So that's the whole thing. The older you get, if you look at it in this perspective, you really don't have that much time left.
Right.
And so don't be spending your time on people that don't want to learn anything. So that's the whole thing.
Absolutely.
If when they ask you for something, then you have a higher probability that they're going to take your advice. Then you can give it to them. But you do a lot of mentorship, you want to treat them good, you want to do this, sometimes it's not worth it until they're ready. That's why the whole thing is, until the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And that's the whole thing. Do not waste time. I wasted a lot of time trying to teach people what is obvious to me or obvious to whatever, and people do that to me too. Now I look at it and I'm like, well, I didn't listen to them, man. I'm just dumb as hell. That's the truth. I just
But
didn't
now
listen
when
to
people
them.
tell you things, you take it into more consideration.
I try to. I'm still guilty of it.
Especially when, depending on who it's coming from. But going back to the time thing, time is our most valuable, precious asset, because we really have no idea how long we're actually here. So it's one resource that is constantly being expended. You're going through time. You're spending it no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
And
so see, time and energy are the most valuable thing. Energy. And energy breaks down to two things. So time, you're going to spend it regardless on anything. It's either invested or wasted. It doesn't matter. It's always ticking. Energy comes down to two things. You got your physical energy and you got your mental energy. So your mental energy is just a fancy way of saying attention. Is where your attention. So that's why they say where your attention goes, your energy flows. So whatever you're thinking about is where you're going to act. So that's what becomes your physical. So whatever you're thinking about, you're actually going to do. So your physical energy, your mental energy, and your time are always going to be spent. Whether you spend them on crap or you spend them on good stuff. No matter what, they're going to be spent.
It's not like you can save it for later.
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
So like millionaires and billionaires are like, if I could spend all my money, what would they do it? They would go back in time. So if billionaires want to spend back on time and you have time, you actually, if you're 45 and the billionaire is 74 and he's going to die next year, 1 year left, nothing is worth anything because time is worth the most.
Yeah, he's going to give everything away to go back and be 45.
So
because
a 45-year-old is richer in time, which is excellent. This is what the billionaire wants. So that's the whole thing. So when you stop giving unsolicited advice, it saves you so much time and energy that you can be dedicated to something. So let me give you a quick example. Think about all the time that you spend on social media consuming it. Just think about it. If you just made the shift from consuming to producing, just made it, how many times have you gone on social media? How much time have you spent on it? If you spend all the time producing it, you'll probably be famous right now. That's what it is. So just so you get a thing. You spend 2-3 hours like that, go by. What if you produced those 2-3 hours?
Or
that's
utilize those hours better.
Yeah.
Something that's going to be more beneficial to yourself instead of just entertainment.
Exactly. So that's one of the examples. The solution of this whole problem is really time and effort invested instead of wasted. So sometimes you have to be aware that a lot of the most precious asset is your time and energy and your attention is where you're putting it to. If you're putting it to people that are not asking for advice, it's really a waste of time. But it's so luring because it's so obvious that we have the solution to their problem, but they don't really want to know. Sometimes they just want attention, or they just want to feel sorry for them.
They want to be validated.
Yeah. That's all it is. Sometimes that's all. It's like you just accept it and move on. Give them a solution and just move on because you got better shit to do, really.
Yeah, because it's like when people come and they complain and they whine about their day, it's like, okay, there's venting, but if they continue to do it over and over, you're kind of like, well, obviously this person keeps coming to me. They must think that I know something that they don't. So let me go ahead and offer it. But then when they receive it, you're like, oh no, that's not what they wanted. They just wanted validation. So once you recognize that, be like, okay, well, I'm sorry that happened to you, and just move on.
Yeah. It's easier said than done, but.
Well, it's easier. Yes. Yeah. It's more difficult to recognize. Absolutely.
But you'll get better and better. I'm better and better. I'll be like, okay, blah, blah, blah. And then I just move on. It's just, you're just more ruthless with time. You're just more ruthless with your energy because you just don't you want to invest. If you look at it as an investment, like, what am I really going to get out of it? I let them know. And there's people that ask for advice and they don't do anything. I just ignore them. Well, yeah. Or just real short with them because they're just a waste of time. And it's okay.
It is, because
sometimes I was a waste of time to other people.
Those are the resources that you cannot get back. It's like you cannot save them. You cannot do anything to hold it still and just utilize later. No. All that we can do with time and energy is maybe take steps to where we can prolong their resource.
Oh, yeah.
But they're always being depleted. They're constantly being depleted.
That's what they call energy vampires, right?
Oh, I heard this great thing. Speaking of that, it kind of it was a new perspective because I've heard of energy vampires, but we were listening to, I think, something Dial. What's his name?
Rob Dial.
Rob Dial. We were listening to him and he put it into a really great kind of perspective. He's like, you have vacuums or batteries. So people that are batteries are ones that give you energy, recharge you, and keep you pushing forward. They're more beneficial, supportive. But supportive is kind of a subjective word. But regardless, they're the ones that give you the push to do what's necessary. Whereas vacuums just suck you dry.
Take time and energy. Yeah.
Oh, yes. And they're not good for anything.
If you got any value from this channel, please subscribe. Please like ours. It helps us out.
If you have other perspectives, please comment.
Thank you very much.
All right.